I'm gonna just wait a few.
All right. Welcome to Post Grad Pitch. My name is Martin McGovern. Today we're going to be talking about, the whole job search in general, but specifically, how do you talk about yourself when you're going through this job search, when you're networking, when you're putting up your portfolio, when you're updating your LinkedIn, when you're making your resume, when you're in interviews, how do you actually talk about yourself in this whole process? It's definitely a bit of an overwhelming piece for most people because you got to take a real critical look at yourself. You got to, butt up against imposter syndrome. You got all sorts of different things going through your head, and I want to address all those questions today. So I'd love to open it up real quick, just to get a sense from the room. What parts of the job search are you most concerned about, or do you have questions on that you want to make sure we cover today? Just give me unmute yourself and shout out different topics and questions that are on your mind.
I just get really nervous, to be honest.
Yeah, getting nervous is it's a big one. I used to have, I guess I technically still do, a pretty bad anxiety disorder. So early on, I would have total panic attacks and freeze up in interviews to the point where I literally couldn't even say words and things like that. So we'll talk about that for sure. And there are lots of techniques that we can use to overcome that, but and to practice and get better. But one thing just to keep in mind, just a sort of quick story before we get into it. I had a student last week who thought she bombed the first question in her interview. They said, "Why do you want to work here?" And she couldn't remember anything about the company and just basically didn't do her research and thought she got the answer completely wrong. And she just went, "Fine, I'm not going to get this job." And she just chilled out the rest of the time and answered questions. And they were like, "You're so relaxed and confident." And they brought her back in for another interview. So a lot of times our nerves are the problem. It's not the information. It's not our imposter syndrome. It's just the fact that we are nervous. We kind of self-fulfill that prophecy, right? That something's going to go wrong. What other topics and things are on your minds today?
Making yourself stand out.
Making yourself stand out. Yeah, getting noticed. Go ahead.
No, I know that's a super general topic, but
Yeah, and there's a lot of different things that can mean, right? Like some people are more extroverted, so that means making videos or reaching out to people. Some people are more introverted. It might mean getting involved in communities and discords and different things like that. So we can definitely talk about a few different ways. But feel free to chime in with questions. I want this to be a pretty conversational presentation today, not just me talking at you for 2 hours. So feel free to interrupt me, ask questions if topics come up and you want to go in more detail. Happy to do that throughout the conversation.
Quick question for
Yeah.
you. What's the normal runtime for people as soon as they graduate getting a job? Like, I'm expecting it to be like a 3 to 6 month window, but is it shorter? Is it longer? And I know it obviously varies from person to person, but generally speaking, there should be some sort of category that most people fall into, right?
Yeah. The typical answer to that, the traditional answer, is 3 to 6 months. That's not necessarily taking into account a pandemic, and that also doesn't take into account individual effort. So the folks who get jobs the quickest. So I have someone who just graduated from her boot camp. It's been 3 weeks and she has an offer. And the reason she has an offer is because throughout the entire boot camp, she was setting up meetings with people, reaching out, interviewing, setting up informational interviews, reaching out to people that she knows in her family. Like she was just hitting everyone up. And she was doing it in a way that was very much like, how can I help? Not how can you give me a job, but what can I do to make your business better? And she always had that very helpful approach to it. So she ended up getting, she's currently in the process of negotiating 2 offers. But I'll have people who are, 6 months. I had someone this morning, they were 6 months into their job search and they're interviewing, but they're not landing that role. And so we're in the real weeds of it. We're in the nuance of what are we saying in the interviews? Literally, what are we saying in our outreach that's not getting responses? Are you reaching out to people? And in her case, she had kind of stopped reaching out to people and wasn't networking. And so if we're doing things, it can be faster. If we're not doing things, or if we're doing it kind of sporadically, or if we're just relying on job boards, if you're just relying on job boards, you're not networking and you're not doing anything else, it could be up to a year or more. I'll have people who say, I've applied to 600 jobs, and I'll go, good for you. It's like a 1 to 3% response rate. So you're going to have to apply to another couple thousand before that pays off. Not to say that job boards are bad, but it's just one part of the overall thing. We got to hit the job boards. We got to hit the networking. We got to combine these things in order to really stand out and get noticed. So we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. But generally speaking, I always say prep for 6 months. Prep for 6 months. It might go a little longer, it might go a little shorter, but if you're ready for that 6-month buffer, you're usually in a pretty good mindset. And the reason for that isn't necessarily even because you're messing anything up. It's just because companies take a long time to hire now. It's not uncommon for 5 to 7 interviews for one company. And each interview has to, go through scheduling, go through, their internal process. So it could take up to 2.5 months to do one interview process. And again, this is where people can get trapped because they start interviewing and then they stop applying because they're so focused on this company. And I really encourage you not to get myopic, because then what happens is all of a sudden you're this far into the process and you get a no. And we're back at zero, right? We're maybe 2 months in and we have to start over again. And the next company is going to be another 2 months. So that's 4 months right there. Boom. You can see how it adds up. But we can definitely talk a little bit more about that. I saw a company with 8 parts to the hiring process. Yeah, it's outrageous. It's totally ridiculous. I'm on your side that it should not be that many, but they're terrified of making a bad hire and losing a bunch of money. Companies are spending upwards of something like $4,000 per candidate that they interview throughout the interview process. So they're making an investment too. So I try to keep myself balanced, although I'm usually on the side of the job seeker that this is ridiculous. So we'll be getting into it. Feel free to chime in with questions as we go through the presentation here. Happy to pause and go deeper into any of these topics that we're going to bring up today. And I'll just hop into sharing my screen here and getting things rolling. Everyone can see my screen? Cool. So today we're talking about the perfect post-grad pitch. Really quick background on who the heck I am. So I started my career out in the marketing world and advertising world. I was working with Fortune 500 companies, and all sorts of different businesses, helping them basically use behavioral psychology to get your money, just to put it bluntly. And now, as I've moved into the education space, I reverse engineer all that so that you can have all the tools and all the tricks and all the behavioral psychology armor to be able to get money back from these companies. So that's really, in my mind, what the job search is. It's managing our emotions and telling our stories better and promoting ourselves better so that companies see us, respect us, and so on. So we'll be using a lot of different stuff to really hit those emotional and promotional sides and really capture people's attention. So getting back to that get noticed piece. I run a business called Career Therapy, and I do like daily live streams, podcasts, and all sorts of cool stuff. But generally speaking, I'm just on phone calls with people every day talking about their job search and helping strategize. So that's what we'll be getting into today. And the way we're going to break it down for today's presentation is, what words are you using? What stories are you telling? And what is your pitch going to be to make a compelling argument for why they should hire you? And a lot of this comes down to confidence. And one of the things I'll talk about as we go through this is to put less stock into these companies, to not put them on such a high pedestal, even though we need a job, even though we need that cash, even though we got bills to pay. The higher of a pedestal we put these companies up on, number one, the harder it is to get a job there because we're so nervous. But number two, the more deflated we are when we get there and realize it doesn't live up to our expectations. I had someone recently who got a job, and he's about 2 months in, and he was so relieved when he got a job because he'd been searching for about 6 months. And he just messaged me last week and he goes, all right, well, I'm done with this place. I want to start the job search again for the next job because this place is a hot mess. And that's what I keep trying to, reiterate to people, because it's kind of not the narrative that's out on the internet. The internet's like, find your passion and everyone is perfect and it all looks so shiny. When the reality is that companies are just people. They're just a bunch of people running around with their hair on fire, trying to hire someone new to help them with the thing that they're struggling with, right? We're struggling as job seekers, but they're struggling as businesses. And if we can help them, if we can put out the fire that's in their hair, they're going to want to bring us on. And so that's the story we have to tell. Why is their hair on fire and how can we put it out? And if we can get to that point, we can really tell some compelling stories. So let's start with the words. Who are you actually going to be talking to in this process? Just give me, unmute, give me a shout. Who do you think you're going to come across throughout your job search? What positions, what kinds of people? Who are you going to be talking to?
Recruiters.
Recruiters. Who else?
Like senior project managers or something like that.
Senior project managers. Cool. Who else?
CEOs.
CEOs. Yep. We'll be talking to recruiters, hiring managers, CEOs, people who have the job we wish we had. We're going to be talking to a lot of different people. And the key thing as we get into talking about our pitch and our story is that we need to make sure that whatever we're saying is something that they care about, right? If I came on here and I just started talking about how much I love psychology and I just started talking about psychology without relating it to the job search, you'd be like, hey man, are you gonna like give us some practical advice about how to get a job, right? So same thing when we go into these interviews, right? If we just start talking about random things that we're interested in, or why we want to learn and be excited about learning, they're going to go, that's all well and good, but are you actually going to, give me an ROI on the salary you're asking for? So we always want to be thinking about what is their perspective? What is it that they need? What drives them? All right. So, you go into a room and you've got someone sitting there and they're about to interview you. What do they really care about? Well, chances are they care about not looking foolish in front of their boss, making a good recommendation of someone who's not going to quit in 3 months. They're looking for confidence. They're looking for trust, right? They're looking for rapport. There's all this stuff that they're looking for that isn't, am I the best at coding or am I the best at whatever? They're looking for a well-rounded set of things that show them you can not only do the job, but also be a good teammate, not cause issues, be able to resolve things and so on. So we really need to stop and think, what is it that they care about, right? So how do we talk to them? This is that shift from a me first perspective to a them first perspective, all right? So you all came to this boot camp for a reason, and it's a personal reason. Maybe you didn't like your last job, maybe you were furloughed, maybe you were laid off, maybe whatever the set of circumstances were, why you're here. Maybe you just want to make more money. I don't know. It's all good. Like people say, how come I can't just go out and say, I want money? Like, why do you want to work here? I want money, right? Well, I mean, that's true for you, but it's also true for every other person that's ever gotten a job, unless they're millionaires and they're just getting jobs to pass the time. I don't know. But it's not a differentiator, right? There is the message we tell ourselves, and then there's the message that we tell others. And both are true, right? We want to tell a true message to ourselves. What motivates me? Learning, solving problems, making money, and so on. But what motivates them? What will motivate them to hire me? And we really want to take the time here to say, not just what am I going to get from this job, but what are they going to get? What problems do they have that I can solve? And if we can solve those problems, we'll be an asset to their team. Now, with this in mind, I know this is a bit of a shift in thinking. I'm curious, or I'll give a quick example. A way that this shows up is in our cover letters. So think about a cover letter you've written at some point. Has anyone written a cover letter recently? All right, I'm seeing some hands go up. If you open that cover letter, count how many sentences start with I, or me, or my. All right? I've literally opened cover letters where every single sentence in the entire 6 paragraphs of that cover letter is I did this. I went here. I want this. I did this. Look at me. And the person who's reading it just starts to fall asleep and roll their eyes, right? Because they're like, so what? I don't care that you've done these things. I care what you can do for me, right? So that's a very basic way to start thinking about these things. But it also becomes more complex when we start thinking, okay, they're asking me interview questions that seem very personal, right? So tell me about yourself. Seems like a very you-focused question, right? So Scott, tell me about yourself. I know you're nervous. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
I just looked at my cover letter right now, and I literally started with an I.
There you go. All right. I'll take that. I'll take that. I won't put you on blast too much.
Should I just read my cover letter then?
Sure.
Just-
Yeah. Give us a rundown.
All right. So basically, I said I started learning programming when I was at Lane Sac High School. And I said it was based on Java. And then after graduating, I went to go pursue programming at UIC. From there, I learned C, C++, Java, and basic Python. And then more stuff. And then after that, I talked about my previous job. And then now I'm talking about like how I decided to go to Coding Temple and that it's focused on full stack development.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And what I'm saying here isn't that you never talk about yourself. Obviously, we have to. It is a job search, right? They need to know who we are. It's just, what do we talk about first? We talk about them first, and then ourselves in relation to them. So when someone says, tell me about yourself, right? We get really anxious because we go, oh gosh, I've got to give them my life story in a sentence, right? No, we don't. We need to tell them what we need to give them information about us in relation to what they care about. All right. So we're going to get to this later on in the presentation, but basically, if I get on the phone with an employer, I'm not going to say, I really enjoy talking to people and, learning about behavioral psychology and just, I enjoy these topics. It's just super fun. I'm going to say, I do these things because they help your students, because studying these things and coaching your students will help get them jobs, which will improve your statistics, which will get more students into your program, right? I know what they care about. More students, better reviews, right? So if I don't address that in my opening pitch, I lose that momentum, all right? So that's what we want to do. It's my skills in relation to your problems. And whenever we're asked questions, we always kind of get really personal with it, like something like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Well, I procrastinate. Okay, so does everyone. How does that actually help the person who's trying to assess you for this role make a better decision on whether to bring you in or not, right? What they're really asking when they say, what are your strengths and weaknesses, is where should we put you on the team? Should we put you on the technical side, on the social side, on the research side, on the presentation side? What should we do with you? What tasks should we assign you? And we can say, my strengths are technical tasks, give me those. My weaknesses are presentation skills. So please don't have me present to the C-suite, right? So that's how we can really approach these things in a them first mindset. Whenever you get asked a question, say, what do they really want to know? I could answer this question literally, but what do they really want to know? So I'm going to put it out there. What are we currently saying? When someone says, tell me about yourself, just someone, unmute, put it in the chat, whatever you want to do. How are you currently describing your experience with Coding Temple?
I haven't gotten to that part yet. So
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Fair enough. Maybe I'm a little too early here. Well, typically what I hear, no worries. What I typically hear people say is, hi, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. What are your thoughts on this sentence here? Good, bad, indifferent?
Wait, could you repeat it?
It's on the screen here. It says, hi, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. What do they hear when we say this?
That you're new, like you're
Mhm.
really new and fresh and
Really new and fresh.
risky.
Risky. Anyone else
They want to learn more
that they want to learn more about you? Okay, so it's
about
not
that
saying enough.
about them.
Oh, right. They want to hear more about them.
them. Because
100%.
they didn't make it more about me.
Exactly.
That I just graduated and I want to know the opportunities. It took the focus of me to you to
Yep.
make them think. Where can I put them? Where will they challenge? Where will they grow and help us at the same time?
Absolutely right. And so here's what they hear. Hi, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and I need you to teach me. Right?
Mhm.
So if we say, I recently graduated, we say I'm inexperienced. I'm excited for this opportunity. I'm unemployed, and I can't wait to learn in this role. Please teach me. Please pay me and teach me. All right. What can we say instead? What do you think? It's okay to be wrong. Just shout out whatever you think.
Maybe more gear it more towards the role. So like, hey, blah blah blah. I graduated here. This role is this. I did a project that showcases that you can do whatever they need, or that you're sufficient or competent within that
Nice.
specific role.
Yeah, definitely moving in the right direction. Any other thoughts?
Looks more like they're begging to be hired.
So we want to do the opposite of that, right?
Yeah. It kind of like you have to mean them want you, not you want them.
Right. So we want to say what's in it for them, right?
Yeah.
So I first of all, we have to own that we are our role, right? So let's say you are a software developer, right? Do you believe you're a software developer right now? Raise the hands. I'm just seeing a lot of shaking heads and smiles. It's all good. It's all good. Like, I understand that this is, high stress, high intensity. You're going through an educational program, right? But the truth of the matter is that everyone who is a software developer has had to go through the process of learning how to develop, right? Everyone has had to go through the process of getting their first job. Everyone has had to go through the process of interviewing. So if you're in any of those parts, from learning to interviewing to actually working, you are already a software developer, because every software developer has to do that, right? If I lose my job as a career coach, if I lose the contract, right? Or let's just say I hang up the phone. We finish this call and I hang up the phone. I'm not currently coaching someone. Does that mean I'm no longer a coach? No, that'd be ridiculous, right? If someone lost their marketing job and they were between jobs, do they cease to be a marketer during that period of time? No, they're just not actively running a campaign, right? So what we need to realize is that if we're going to ask a company for $60, $70, $80,000, we might want to actually believe that we deserve it for them to give it to us, right? Because the truth of the matter is, even if you feel nervous about it, you're going to Google your way through to success in that role, right? Everyone's got Google. Everyone can figure it out, right? It might be hard in the interview to just retain all this information, but once you're in the job, they're not going to say you're not allowed to Google, right? So you're going to achieve the results. You're going to have to, or you're going to get fired, in which case it's all moot anyway. So we can say, I am a software developer because if you hire me for this role, that is the work I will do. I will do software developer work. And if we believe it, then we can actually communicate it. So, the question came up before, how do I get noticed? Step one of getting noticed is actually noticing yourself, noticing your own skills, and actually understanding that you can do this job, even if you're nervous about it, even if there's a long way to go in your learning, right? One of the best things to also realize is how, people who are in the job aren't perfect either. So many times I get messages from people saying, I was so nervous to start this job, and now that I'm here, no one here has a clue what they're doing, So you're probably more experienced than you think as well, right? I have an endless amount of stuff that I can learn as a career coach, and I will continue to learn throughout my career, but I'm never going to sit there and say, well, I'm not a career coach if that is the pursuit, if that's the journey that I'm on, right? So own your experience. You went through a program, you're going through a program. This is part of being a developer, all right? So here's what we can say instead. Hi, I heard you have big goals for your business. Here's how I can help you solve your problems and grow. Now we need to maybe ask some questions or do some research to figure out what these problems are, but it's me in relation to them, not me in relation to myself, right? So this is me in relation to myself. I graduated, I'm excited, I want to learn, versus you have big goals, I have skills, here's how I can help you achieve your goals, right? So I'd like to just pause here real quick. What are the typical goals or typical problems that a company has on a just daily basis? Let's just start really broad. What are the broad business problems that exist? What is every company struggling with to some degree?
To make money.
Okay, to make money. What else?
Like market research.
Market research. So to make money, that's every company's goal, right? They have to have enough revenue to pay their employees and make profit and pay shareholders and all that stuff, right? So what are all the facets behind a company making money? What are all the different ways that they make money or lose money?
Advertising.
Advertising. So they need to get awareness of their company out there. What else do they do to get money?
Happy employees.
Happy employees. So that might, lead to more productivity. Cool. So if you're in HR or something, that's a great idea. What are some of the technical things that help companies make or save money?
Efficiency.
Efficiency. Cool. What kinds of efficiency?
Having an up-to-date tech stack.
An up-to-date tech stack. Very cool. Why is that helpful for a company?
Legacy code, when built on older software, isn't as scalable. And as they make it bigger, it gets slower.
There you go. So website speed. And what happens if a website is too slow?
People click out of it.
People leave the website, right? So retention, website retention, click-through rates, the number of clicks to purchase, right? The speed of the site loading, the design of the site. There's a million different problems that a website has that are either losing the company money or making the company money. And if we can identify those pieces, we now go in with an arsenal of things we can talk about, right? Hey, have you made it, have you updated your website to meet all ADA guidelines so that, people with disabilities can view your site? Have you made sure that it's user-friendly? Are the logins pre-populated? Are XYZ, right? There's a million things that you can do for this website to make it grow. Sorry, there is a helicopter like right outside my building right now, and I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if you can hear it, but it is very, very loud on my end. It's very interesting. But we're going to dig in here. So here's a few questions you can ask yourself. What problems does the company have? And what skills do I have that help address those problems? So let's break that down a little bit more. So we said one of the problems might be that they have slow loading websites. What skills do you have, or could you Google quickly to help a company improve the speed of their website? I saw you unmute, Danny, so I'm going to call on you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I was just, I guess, like really quickly, just like how to make like Google, right? Like how to make a website run faster.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you can Google it. And anyone have ideas what would show up if we Googled that?
Stack Overflow, maybe.
All right, Stack Overflow. So here's some good things that you can do on your own. You can Google common business problems.
You might want to check the connection settings in the Google Home
Just a second. Google is waking up. It is very strange on my side of this call with helicopters and voice robots yelling at me, but we will push through. You can Google what are typical business problems, or my favorite thing to do, pretend you're an employer. Google, why should I hire a software developer? And take a look at the articles and the sales pages of the companies that sell contractors, of the individual portfolios of people that have these jobs, and so on. You can literally just copy the language there, right? If you go to the sales page of a small web dev consultancy, they have an entire page of why you should work with us. And you can say, that resonates with me, that resonates with me, that resonates with me. That's what I want to help companies do. And now we have our sales messaging, right? You don't have to invent all this stuff from scratch. No one is inventing this stuff. We are just talking about the reality of business and how your skills that you've been learning help these companies, all right? That brings us to our stories. So what are some of the stories that we can tell to really drive home our points? How do we show them what we can do? Well, a lot of times we stay very high level with the things that we talk about in an interview or while networking. You know, someone will say, tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a coworker. Well, this one time I had a conflict with a coworker, but we figured it out and everything was okay. And we figured it out. We got back to work. It's like, who was the coworker? What was the project? What was the conflict? How was it resolved? Did you win or did you lose, right? We really need to get into the details here because the details are what engage people, right? So as you think about what you've done throughout your career, really think about what were the moments throughout my career that I was struggling or that I was successful. So I'm going to pause here. I'd like everyone to think of an example of a time that you showed leadership in a role and a time that you had a conflict with a coworker in a role. All right? Take a moment and put your answer in the chat. And you can give me the high level notes here. You don't have to go into detail in the comment. All right, EA. I'm having a hard time with the leadership one, but an old boss was really horrible. I tried to avoid working with her and tried to buffer myself. So I want to be clear, when we are in interviews and we're answering these questions and we're talking about ourselves, there is a tendency to want to tell the worst story or to tell the most personal insecurity around our strengths and weaknesses or something like that. That's not what they're asking. they're not asking what the worst interaction you've had with a coworker is. They're asking, what is a conflict you've had with a coworker? So again, putting ourselves back in that mindset of what are they really asking, right? When a person, an interviewer says, tell me about yourself, we hear literally, tell me about yourself, right? And then we go, I went to school here and I worked here and I worked here and now I'm sitting here. Hi, right? What they're really asking is, I don't know how to start this conversation. Can you start it? Or, hey, I didn't do my research on you. Could you just bring me up to speed on things? Right? So you get to set the tone of how you answer that question. And typically what I try to encourage folks to do is to set a tone of, here's how I help, right? Same thing with strengths and weaknesses or conflict with a coworker. So tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. I'm not asking the time that you got berated at work. I'm asking about a time where you had a conflict that doesn't make you emotional in this interview because it could really throw off the energy in the room. A conflict that doesn't make you emotional that you learned from, right? So really what I'm asking you is, what have you learned about how you deal with conflict, right? So let's say you're an avoidant person by nature, all right? What I would typically say in this answer is, well, I'm typically an avoidant person, but with a recent conflict I had, I learned to at least get my voice heard so that I could contribute to the team, even if my recommendation wasn't chosen. And that's a nice answer, but we're in the stories section, right? So I should really tell a real story, shouldn't I? I shouldn't just keep it generic, right? Generic doesn't resonate. So I could tell the story about a time where I was working at a company and they had a job search guarantee. And we're going to break this down with the STAR method. And STAR is situation, task, action, and result. So I was working with a education technology company, and we had a career coaching program that had a job search guarantee. I've set up the situation. The task I was given was to improve our results and improve our metrics in the program. And the way that people had typically been trying to improve those metrics was to hold people to harsher accountability for the job search metrics that they were being measured on. I thought that was a little bit unfair because you can't give a job search guarantee and then turn around and say, well, you didn't fill out your form, you didn't fill out your spreadsheet enough, and then take away the job search guarantee. Because now you're not just hurting the person who didn't get a job, you're like double hurting them, right? Because now they don't have a job and they don't get the job search guarantee and they feel like idiots. So I had an issue with that, right? So I voiced that issue to my manager, and they allowed me to tweak and be a little bit more flexible with some of the requirements in order to help people out, give people second chances, and not be so strict. We were still able to improve the metrics through other means, but that was one thing that I tried to minimize to the best of my ability. So situation, task, I had to change the metrics. Action, here's how I approached dealing with this conflict that I had. And result, we still got, an increase. We maybe didn't get as high of an increase as we wanted to in the metrics, but I was able to do it in a way that I was mostly comfortable with, right? And what that taught me, I'll even put an N to this, an L, so starl, if you want to make it weird. But the learning, what did I learn from this? What I learned from this is that I don't have to just carte blanche do what I'm told. I can actually go back and push back on things and make things a little bit more equitable in my work, because I have to be someone who is trustworthy as a coach, and I don't want to be, laying down the law every single time someone messes up, because I think that actually hurts their ability to get the job in the long run. So this is a very long story, but what I'm trying to do is give you context of like how much more that resonates than if I just said, I learned to stand up for myself with no story attached, right? And thank you for putting in the comments a long story. You do not need to apologize for putting a long story, because that is the whole point here, right? We're trying to get better at telling stories. So the longer it is, the better we can get at telling it. So I've come across clients that are unsatisfied with the technical support that has been provided to them. There are times when we cannot simply give the client what they want. So you set up the situation, you also called out the problem, right? As a result, there have been team disagreements regarding handling irate clients. I once disagreed with a coworker about how an irate client was handled, and the first thing I did was briefly meet with the coworker. I explained this decision and the steps I took to resolve the client's technical problem. I actively listened to their thoughts on it and what they would have done differently. And we both agreed that although individual cases can have multiple approaches, our goal was to make a fair decision for all of our clients. We came up with a new solution to solve issues like this in the future. This is a perfect example. Thank you so much for sharing this, of how to use a story to illustrate the point, right? I could tell you that I'm a really empathetic person. I could tell you that I'm really nice. But as soon as you hear me say that I'm really nice, don't you get a little bit of a red flag that pops up in your head going, why is this person telling me he's so nice? Maybe he's not so nice, right? Like, the more we try and justify or say something without giving a real story to back it up, the harder it is for people to believe it, right? So it's much better to tell a story that showcases that you're an understanding person than to just say, well, I'm a very understanding person. It's like, well, show me. Like, I mean, obviously this is all stories, so it's all tell, but show, don't tell, right? Explain, don't just state, okay? Any questions on this? Oh, here's another one. I used to sell cars. My coworker was not around, and the customer came in and I helped them sell the car, and we both split the commission on the deal. I learned it is better to help another person than to do it on your own. That's awesome. Be a little bit more clear on what the conflict was and how you resolved it. But I think that that's a really great start of a story there, right? Situation, task, action, result, and what I've learned that I'm taking forward. And maybe I can rephrase that. It's set up the situation. So let's call it SPARL. I'll put it in the chat here. SPARL. Situation, problem. So situation, problem, action, result, and learning. And if there was no conflict at that time, we probably don't want to use that to answer the conflict question. Maybe you can use that to answer the question, tell me about a time that you showed leadership in your role. Well, I showed leadership by doing this, or tell me about a time that you were proud of the work that you did. Well, I was able to sell this car when someone was out, and I even split the winnings with them, And again, the point here is to illustrate. It's to almost infer our soft skills to people, right? If I go in and I say I'm a hard worker, who isn't? Like, does anyone have hard worker or problem solver on your resume or cover letter or LinkedIn?
I used to.
Used to. Okay, good. It's off. Anyone can say that, right? If no one would ever say the opposite, it's probably not worth saying. No one's going to say I'm a lazy worker. All right. So saying I'm a hard worker says nothing. So what we want to do instead is tell these stories, and these stories illustrate, they infer our soft skills, right? So instead of saying I'm an empathetic person, I could tell you the story of a time when someone was telling me about their suicidal tendencies on a coaching call. I could tell you the story about a divorcee who was really struggling with finances during her coaching call. I could tell you the story about how I would stay on the phone with someone for an hour and a half while they just cried about things, right? That's the kind of stuff, because then it illustrates what kinds of people I can handle and what things I can learn that I can help with on the team, right? But it can also go the other way, right? It can also illustrate what not to give me, right? I was put on a team once and they said, here's a spreadsheet, do a predictive analysis on when all these people will get jobs. And I looked at them and my jaw hit the floor and I said, I can't add on the fly. Please don't make me do this. I don't know how to do predictive analyses. I can track data. I can give it to the data people, but please don't make me do math in this role. Like that is just not my strength. So we go into the strengths and weaknesses question here, right? Tell me about a strength and tell me about a weakness. Well, so often we say, well, sometimes I have a hard time delegating. Can you give me an example of that? Sometimes I have a hard time with procrastination. Can you give me an example of that? Do you have something better that you could share that's a little less generic, something a little more you? Maybe you're really into data. Well, I love getting into the data. As a matter of fact, on this one project, I was assigned the data role and I just loved it. I crushed it. I was going through all these APIs and I was doing all these different things and so on and so forth and really getting into the weeds. And then I handed it over to our design team and they made it look pretty because I'm not a strong designer, but I am really strong at the back end, right? So that's how you can really start to balance out. You know how they say turn a negative into a positive? I don't think that's necessarily what we need to do. I think we just need to put into context what our strengths and weaknesses are in relation to each other. You want videos? I'm your guy. You want coaching? I'm your guy. You want predictive analysis? Move on to the next coach. There is an analytical coach out there, right? So I'd love to pause real quick. What is a strength and a weakness? Take a moment to think about it and then put it in the chat. What is one of your strengths and one of your weaknesses? But think more practically because that's not the real question. The question is, if we put you on a team, what tasks should we assign you? Technical tasks, social tasks, research tasks, design tasks, the list goes on and on, all right? So think back to your projects, think back to your education, past jobs. You know, please don't give me a spreadsheet with data in it, but please do give me, you know, students on the verge of tears. That's my, it's my little pocket, right? But everyone's going to have their own thing. So I'd love to see you don't have to tell the whole story in the chat. Just give me what word you'd want to convey. I'm good with social and design tasks. Very cool, Danny. And what is the opposite of that? What's the thing that you want to be 20% of your job, not 80% of your job? If I were to say this is 80% of what you do every day and this is 20% of what you do every day, what would be the 20%?
Kind of like you like math or anything with you know, like too much on the fly, like subtracting or multiplying or something.
Exactly.
I'm not too good at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in an interview once and the person, I didn't even want to be in this interview. I got kind of cornered at a startup hub and this person just started interviewing me for some sales job. And I was like, what am I doing in this room? I got to get out of here. And he's like, so you would have this many customers that you'd be chasing. And there's about a 0.235%, you know, conversion rate. And that would lead to how many conversions? And I just went, oh, I can't do math in my head. It just got so awkward. And he's like, oh, well, it would be this number. And he moved on. And then he did it again. And then he did it again. And then he did it again. And by the end, I was like, man, I didn't learn math in the last 20 minutes. So please stop. Like, this is not going to be a good role for us. So those are the things where it's like, you know, we want to lean into our strengths and we want to be able to communicate them well. And again, isn't it better to hear that story of me failing at an interview than just me to say like, you know, don't make me do math. It's much more fun to tell a story. What other strengths and weaknesses are on your minds? As you're thinking about it, one thing to keep in mind here, if you know that one of these weaknesses that you're going to talk about is essential to the role, it's actually a primary part of the role, be careful of using that as your go-to weakness. Maybe find something else to talk about, or put it into its proper context. So I say I'm bad at math, but I always caveat it with I can track data. I can put it into HubSpot or spreadsheets or whatever you need it. I can even create spreadsheets. I'm just not going to be the one who analyzes it and comes up with predictive analyses. So I need to be partnered with someone on the team who knows how to do the data analysis. So it's not that I can't organize information. It's that I can't do the predictive analyses, right? So you want to be very clear when you're talking about your strengths and weaknesses as to what you're speaking to specifically. Any additional thoughts in the chat here? It's all right. I'll let you off the hook. But if you have questions on this, like, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn and let me know what you're chewing on. I know this is a lot that I'm throwing at you all at once. It's a very long presentation. So feel free to connect with me. And you know, if you want to say, oh, you know, I've been thinking about that and here's what I think, I'll give you a breakdown of how to either talk about it or how to adjust it to be proper. The main thing we don't want to do is say things that make us uncomfortable, right? So don't tell a story of a conflict at work that you're still upset about. Don't don't talk about a weakness that you don't want to talk about, right? This happened to me once. Probably the biggest conflict I had in work was one of the times that I was a manager for the first time. And I ended up managing the person that trained me. They were put on a PIP and then someone went on maternity leave, and through circumstances, I ended up being their manager. And they were not happy that they trained me and I got the job above them. And it's not like I had that job forever. I was just filling a gap because I was a contractor. But boy, was that an awkward 6 months. And the thing is that when I try to talk about it, now I'm a little bit less emotional about it. But back when I was trying to get jobs after I left that company, I was still heated. If her name came up, I would get like physically like flush in the face, you know, I'd be like upset. And I'm like, oh, great. I was having this wonderful interview where everyone was super happy and positive. And now all of a sudden I'm like angry, and the interviewer can tell because they're like, wow, the mood really shifted in here. Don't tell that story. Tell a different story, right? So these are the things where it's like, you know, I've come to terms with it now. I can talk about it here. And she doesn't watch my stuff, so I'm sure it's fine. But the point being is like, tell the things that you're comfortable with, or tell the story so many times that it becomes like you're talking about someone else, like it's not even related to you. All right. And that's what we want to do. We want to talk not necessarily about what, I think I have a typo here. Talk about what you did, not what you learned. Talk about what you did and what you learned. I think I might have written that wrong. Sorry about that. The point here is that we want to set up our stories in a way where we're saying, here is what happened, but more importantly, here's how it will influence my work at your company. Remember, it's not just enough that we say, I had a conflict or I have strengths and weaknesses. We have to tie it back to what they care about. Okay. So if I tell you that my weakness is data analysis and my strength is empathy, and I give the story about the spreadsheet that I was given, and I give the story about the, you know, person going through a divorce, I don't just stop at the end of that story. I say, so what this means is that if I get brought on for this role, I'll be the one who can take on all your emotional students, all the people who are struggling the most, and I can help them through those difficulties and get back to a positive place in their job search. So I tie it back to what the company needs, right? So for you, it's like, I'm really good at the back end of building websites, but I'm not so great at presentations. So what that means is that I can do all the research, I can pull in the APIs, I can get everything functioning, and then I can hand it off to the person on the team who's really good at presenting it to the client, and I can give them all the information that they need in order to be able to answer any questions that come up, right? So you're giving the full context of the story and talking about how it helps, how you fit into the team, all right? I'm gonna pause there. Any questions on that?
I think I have one question. So I'm still struggling like with my strengths and weaknesses. Is there some sort of assessment that helps with that?
Yes. So there is a lot of different personality tests that you can take. I typically recommend 16 personalities because it's free, although I find the Enneagram to be more accurate. Not that any of these are super scientific. So if you disagree with it, I actually find that to be just as interesting as if you agree with it. the nice thing about the 16personalities.com, which is basically a cartoony version of the MBTI, is that it uses very clean language. So I'll actually pull that up real quick and show you what it looks like. So if you go to 16personalities.com, can you still see my screen? Cool. So I am personality type. I've tested a bunch of different things, but the most common thing I test at is a mediator, which makes sense. I'm a coach, right? So I'm a flower child, apparently. And you go in here and it literally has a section called strengths and weaknesses. So I'm thoughtful, I'm generous, I'm open-minded, I'm creative, I'm passionate. But you know what I don't want to say in an interview? I don't want to say I'm passionate. Everyone says that. It's also just vague, right? So maybe creative. Maybe I can say, how am I creative? Come up with an example and then talk about it from that perspective, right? So how am I personally creative? Well, I create videos and content and curriculum and all sorts of different things. So I can say I'm a pretty creative person. So if you ever need a presentation put together or a video made or a webinar put on, I can usually put that together pretty easily, right? And then you go down here, overly idealistic, not something I'd want to say in an interview. Self-critical, also probably not something I want to say in an interview. Impractical, most definitely not something I'd want to say in an interview. But what I can say is, how am I impractical? Well, how am I self-critical? Well, how am I overly idealistic? Again, I don't think these are wonderful as like exact things to copy and paste into your conversation in an interview, but it does help start the conversation of like, where am I strong? Where am I weak? And you can also look at career paths and say, well, what are the career paths, right? Well, mediators are often very creative people. Well, if I'm a creative person, what does that mean? I'm probably not a detail-oriented data person, right? They kind of go opposites. If you're an artist, you're probably not a mathematician, although that is definitely not always true. I'm just kind of, painting broad strokes here. The question is for you, what jobs have you been in where you're like, yes, give me more of this job. Every day, I can't wait to do more of this job. And what jobs have you been in where you're like, please do not make me go in for another day, right? So the way that I like to think about it is to say, my very first job out of college, I had a lot of different roles. One was in the creative department, helping create advertising that was actually like being printed out at stores and stuff. And it looked pretty cool. And I used Photoshop and Illustrator and all sorts of different stuff. And another role I had was dealing with 10,000, cell spreadsheets. Which one did I enjoy more? The creative one, right? So that's the kind of stuff I should hit home on, not the spreadsheet work. But that's if I'm going for, another marketing job. So for each of you, it's like, definitely use this stuff, but don't, get too tied up in it, right? Just because it's in here doesn't mean it's the right thing to say. And I would also say, think back to any feedback you've gotten from managers. Has a manager told you you're really good at something or told you you're not good at something? Like I always got applauded for the presentations I gave, even though I had like horrible anxiety giving them. I always was told, good job. That was, people enjoyed it. I was also told I talk way too much by a bunch of high schoolers, which, fair enough. Thanks. It's like, I got to fill a whole day with you guys. I don't know what to do, but, these are the things where it's like, okay, sometimes we can just lean on what other people have told us. I've been told by other people that I'm a good listener because I'm a coach, right? So I should say something along those lines in the interview. And I can even outsource it. I could say, well, I'm told by friends, family, clients, etc., that I'm a pretty good listener one-on-one. And I've also been told that I kind of overlook details a lot of the time. I got feedback in my last job, which was about spreadsheets and heavy detail-oriented work, that I was, there would always be like a cell off somewhere, and that was not good. That's why I typically try not to be working in Excel all day, and I try to be spending a lot more time doing more creative stuff and so on and so forth, right? So for you, you just have to sit down and say, where have I gotten good feedback? Where have I gotten negative feedback? How do I talk about that in a way that the company would care, right? I don't want to just say, I'm creative. I made a comic strip once. They're going to be like, who cares about your comic strip? I want to say I'm creative so I can help your business make presentations to do X, Y, and Z. Or I'm detail oriented so I can help fix the back end of your site to run faster, right? Tie it to the things they care about. I feel like I might be belaboring the point, but did I answer all your questions? Any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next one? Okay. I do appreciate these questions. I love them. So thank you for asking them. So what is a project that you've worked on that you're proud of in class? Feel free to unmute or put it into chat.
Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
What is a project that you're proud of that you worked on in your cohort?
I think the weather app. I feel like the weather app was super fun to do.
And what did you enjoy most about the weather app, and what did you not enjoy the most about the weather app?
The designing part, probably making things work.
You enjoyed that or didn't enjoy that?
I enjoyed those.
Cool. So you can tell the story of building that weather app. And again, you're not saying, I suck at this, never give me that task. You're saying, my preferences are this over that. So if you have tasks that are more aligned with this, I'd be the right one to give it to. And if you have tasks that are more aligned with this other stuff, it's not that I can't do it. It's just that I'm not going to be as good as, you know, the data person or whatever it might be. All right. So again, we're not trying to give them binary answers. We're trying to give them a spectrum of understanding of what tasks to assign us in a job. Cool.
Yep. Thanks.
You got it. And then when we tell the story, I've already broken down the STAR method for you, but another way you can do it is with the story arc here. All right. So we've got whoops. Oh, right. I can't double click it when we're in the presentation. There we go. So you've got the inciting incident, the rising action, the climax, the falling action. This is basically the STAR method. You set up the exposition. So that's setting the scene. Inciting incident is the task or the problem. The rising action is the approach. The climax is the result. The falling action and so on is the learnings from it that you'll take to the next role. Okay. So just other ways to think about these things. Anyone have issues with rambling? I know I do. I mean, we're filling 2 hours here pretty easily, right? No, you're all pretty succinct, quiet group. I like that. The main thing I want you to remember here is you don't need 10 stories for every question. You need one story per question. As a matter of fact, one story can answer lots of questions. So the story of the time that I helped someone who, you know, was talking to me about their, you know, suicidal thoughts, I can tell that story to answer a time where I'm proud of the work I did. I can tell that story to talk about where I noticed my limitations in my abilities. I could tell that story from what are your strengths and weaknesses? I could tell that story from all these different perspectives, and I can tell the same story from multiple perspectives to answer multiple questions. So you really only need about 6 stories, maybe 3 positive stories, 3 negative stories to start with, to be able to answer a lot of interview questions, right? Tell me about a time you showed leadership. Well, I was working on this project and no one stepped up, so I stepped in and here's what I did. And I was able to show leadership, and it taught me this about how I might show leadership in future roles. Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. Well, in that same project where I was showing leadership, I had a conflict with this coworker, and here's what ended up happening, and here's how we resolved it. Tell me about a time that, you know, you're really proud of your work. Well, the outcome of that project led me to be able to help the business do X, Y, and Z, and I'm really proud of that, right? So we can kind of dissect our stories from multiple perspectives. And then, you know, when it comes to what are your strengths and weaknesses, give one strength and one weakness. Don't say, my strength is this and that and this and the other thing, right? That's us overcompensating because we don't know how to back up our strengths and weaknesses. So just come up with a really strong one or a couple strong ones and then choose the one that's right for that conversation. Any questions on this piece before we move on? So we don't have to be chronological. You want to focus these stories around what they care about, right? So keywords, like what did they want to hear? Read the job description, learn about the industry, really try to hit home those phrases that they really want to hear, right? And when should we tell these stories? Well, these stories become the basis of your elevator pitch, your LinkedIn summary, your interview answers, really anything where you're trying to get a point across about, I'm able to do these things, or I've done these things, which have taught me these things, which allow me to do my work in this way. All right. That's what we're trying to get across. So here's a few questions. If you want to screenshot this or write them down in your notebook, here's a few things that you can do to come up with some good stories. What was your favorite project? What problem did you solve in that project? What skills did you use to solve that problem in that project? What outcomes did you get from the resolution of that project? All right. So next we're going to get into the pitch. This is where the rubber hits the road. Apologies for all the noise in the background. So our pitch is basically a simplified version of these stories. All right. We're really, again, trying to show that value. So here's a way that you can organize it. So back to that big question, tell me about yourself, right? Everyone was worried about that question at the beginning. The way I want you to think about this, because normally what we do is we say, here's where I went to school. Here's what here's my last job. Here's what I'm doing now. And I'm here to talk to you, right? Instead of going chronologically, try and set it up a little bit more focused again around what they care about. What are you currently doing? How did you get here? And where are you going? All right. So I am currently focused on software development, or I'm currently focused on helping companies implement better software and build better websites that convert more customers and retain more clients, or whatever you want to say, right? I'm kind of making stuff up. So I'm currently a web developer helping businesses accomplish these goals. That's what you're currently doing today. I got here through my background in customer service, which taught me X, Y, and Z about user experiences and how people interact with websites and got me interested in development. So I'm currently doing this. I used to do that. It showed me that I have an interest in web development. So present, past leading up to the present. And now I'm really excited to learn more about this role and see how I can help improve your company's website and, get the outcomes you're looking for from this role. Or I'm excited to learn more about this role and see where I can bring value to the team. All right. Present, past, future. Does anyone want to try and give this a shot? High pressure. I know. You want me to put myself on blast first? I can do that. All right. So I could start with, I was a marketer, and then and again, you don't have to follow these templates. They're just templates, right? They're things that might be able to help you organize. But I could say I started my career in marketing, then I went to advertising, then I went to consulting, then I started a business, then I went and got a project manager job, and then I started another business, and now I'm doing coaching. I could have gone through all that and bored you to death, right? But instead I say, I'm currently a career coach helping Organizations coach their students in helping individuals navigate the emotional and promotional sides of their job search so that they can find jobs with less stress. I got to this point through my background in marketing and advertising, where I learned about behavioral psychology, learned about how to help people pitch themselves and brand themselves. And that led me into the education space, where I'm now working as a coach. I'm excited to learn more about your students and see how I can help bring value to your team and help guide them through the process so that they can do better in their job search and get more job offers. All right. Present, past, future. So right now, all of you, you're all web developers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a web developer helping companies do X, Y, and Z or solve X, Y, and Z problems. I got here through my background doing blank, and I'm excited to learn more about this role and see where I can bring value to the team. Does anyone have an example or want to just let me know what job you were doing before this? No one was working before this? Go ahead.
I guess I'll go. I worked as a mechanical technician / IT also.
Cool. So, and what did you do in that IT mechanical role?
I worked with CPS. Basically like help teachers or staff or principals or whoever, fix their computer.
Cool. So I'm currently a web developer helping companies troubleshoot and debug different aspects of their website, and as well as implement new software that will improve their user experience. I got to this point through my background working in IT with CPS, where I was helping teachers fix their computers, troubleshoot, debug, do all the different things that you need to do to keep the staff running technologically. And I'm really excited to learn more about this role and see how I can help improve the efficiency of your team's code and implement new things that will, make the product grow. I'm excited to see where I can bring value to the team.
I'm definitely going to write that down.
And we are recording this. We are
Right.
recording this, so it'll be up on YouTube if you want to come back, just timestamp whatever time it is right now.
Right.
But this is how we can start breaking things down, right? Again, these are templates. You don't have to follow the template once you get comfortable. It's just a way to get to the point of comfort, right? I used to have an anxiety disorder, so I would rely on these templates very heavily. But eventually, you start to just kind of roll with it. And sometimes you follow the template, sometimes you don't. But no matter what, you're more confident in what you're saying because you at least have something to fall back on. All right. And then we connect the dots by looking backwards, right? So I did this and then I did this. But what did I learn from the first thing I did that informed the second thing I did? All right. So I worked in marketing, then I worked in advertising, then I worked in consulting, then I worked in entrepreneurship, then I worked as a project manager, and now I'm a coach. And there were a bunch of other transitions in there. It's what did I learn from one role to the other? That's what matters, right? When I was in marketing, doing a lot of technical marketing, I realized I wanted to be closer to the creative side. Then I moved to advertising. When I was in advertising, I realized I wanted to get more hands-on experience with individuals because I was spending so much time behind a computer. I never saw like the feedback loop, right? I would just send things out, get numbers back. I never saw a person be impacted by my work. So I started putting on events and teaching people personal branding, and people were getting jobs. And that was exciting. So then I started getting into education, and then that led to career coaching, right? So each thing that I was trying to run away from or run towards informed my next decision. So talking about what you learned about yourself in each role is much better than talking about, well, I didn't like my boss, so I had to leave, or, well, they furloughed me, or, well, I just didn't know what else to do, so I went to this boot camp, right? Not strong answers. We want to say I was doing this and I realized this about myself, so I made a change and I moved forward with things. And then you want to keep it short. Here is a template that you can use to create the simplest version of your elevator pitch as the alarm bells go off in the background here. What is going on with that car? Merging a background in my previous role with my current focus, I help companies solve these problems and get these outcomes. All right. Take a screenshot of this. We're also going to do an exercise here. Here's an example. Merging a background in customer service and web development, I help companies create amazing experiences for their users across the web. It says what I used to do. It says what I currently do. It says how what I used to do informs what I currently do, creating great experiences. And it shows how it helps the company. All right. So write your pitch. We're going to take 5 minutes here for each of you to write your pitch. Merging a background in this role and that role, I help companies solve these problems to get these outcomes. You don't have to be perfect here. Just, I used to do this. I'm currently a software developer or web developer, however you want to write it. And I'm trying to help companies with these problems. Okay. Again, here's the example. If you want to screenshot it real quick. And here's the template. All right. Put it in the chat when you have it done. Don't stress out. This is a first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're struggling, just let me know and we'll go through it together. Nice, Scott. All right. So merging a background in IT and software development, I help companies. I help companies troubleshoot bugs. I help companies address bugs in their code, prevent crashes, and improve their workflow efficiency. So that would be my slight edit to that. But yes, you're right on the right track here. And maybe we get that specific, or maybe we stay a little bit broad. It's something that you're going to, go back and forth with as you talk with people and see what's comfortable with you. Maybe it's too specific for a certain job, but maybe it's exactly the right amount of specific for a networking conversation or something like that. Merging a background in technical support, customer service, and web development, I help companies identify the weaknesses in their website to improve user friendliness and increase user satisfaction. All words that companies are going to go, wait, what? you increase user satisfaction, you improve our user friendliness. Those are all great words that are going to make them go, oh, I get the ROI of this person. This person is going to make our users happy. Happy users equal more money. More money equals better business. Let's do it. Let me know if you need more time. Just raise your hand, or we can move on. You can always send me this on LinkedIn later if you need more time to work on it. All right. Merging a background in mechanical engineering with software development, I help companies optimize their code and create more efficient applications for their users. Wonderful. All right, feel free to keep on working on it. We just did our share out, so I won't make you unmute, no worries. But here's how we can use it in our job search. You can add this to your LinkedIn profile, your about, your summary on your resume. You can just copy and paste this for your summary on your resume in LinkedIn, for sure. You can use this as the baseline for the question, tell me about yourself. Although, like we said before, the present, past, future approach is also really good, a really good way to go about it. And the goal here is to just have your story for you and then find the way to tell it for them. All right. So you know why you've done all these things. You have the long version in your head. Now the question is, what do they care about and how can I communicate that? And we'll open up the rest of the time here for questions, or if you do finish your pitch and you want me to review it, by all means. All right, I threw a lot of information your way. I'm sure it's a little bit of like a woo, all right. But I'm gonna pause here. What is still maybe on your mind that is a little bit overwhelming about the job search and interacting with people and interviewing and things like that? Is there anything we didn't cover?
I think one of the things that might be helpful is, in part, it's a numbers game. So there's going to be, hundreds or thousands of applications that we go through. There's going to be a number of interviews that we go through. How do you keep up the morale if, 25 interviews in a row all say no? Because that's definitely going to weigh on me, I know. But that's also part of the process, the usual process.
It is. So the first thing is bravo on getting 25 interviews. It's tough to get. So already success. Yeah, exactly. One of the things that is helpful to realize is that most companies and most jobs never live up to our standards. So we're losing out on things, yes, but we are probably not losing out on things that are as amazing as we think. So if we say this is our dream job and then we don't get it, it's a real downer and it can really crush people. So every time someone comes to me and they're like, oh my God, I got an interview with this company and I'm so excited. My first gut instinct is to try and make them not excited. Like try and reduce that excitement. I want the highs to be more muted and I want the lows to be less depressing in the job search. I want everything to just be kind of, that's interesting, right? So if you're in an interview and you start bombing, it's very easy to just lose it, right? Like let's say you're rambling on a story and you realize you're rambling and you don't even remember the question, or maybe you're trying to get back to it. The typical thing people do is they freeze and then they get really worried. And then the rest of the interview goes off the rails because they don't know what to say. one of the things I've tried to train myself to do is to laugh in my head. So if I screw something up, I try to pass it off as excitement, which it is, honestly. The reason I'm nervous is because I'm excited. So if I'm screwing up an interview and I'm rambling, which I tend to do, I'll pause and I'll call it out. I'll say, I just get really excited about this stuff. And I started rambling there. Let me restate your question, confirm that that was the question that you asked me, and give you a more succinct answer. And that level of confidence, number one, goes a long way. But that level of being able to not take it so seriously or being able to respond better when it goes wrong is really what we're trying to focus on here. So if you have 25 interviews and you haven't gotten any of them, the question becomes, what's going on in this interview? Because clearly your job search materials are great. All right, if you've got 25 interviews. And that's another thing. We don't, as soon as we hit a milestone, it's like that milestone never existed, right? So the first thing is can I get an interview? I got to get my resume together. I got to get my portfolio together. I got to do all these different things. And I'm not getting any interviews and no one's getting back to me. And this is a real pain in the butt. And I sit with those people and I coach them through that. And they're frustrated the whole time just to get to the interview. Then they start getting interviews because they've mastered resumes and they've mastered applications and they've built that skill set and networking and everything like that. So then you get to the interview and you're not getting the job. So you're just as frustrated as when you weren't getting the interviews. What we need to do is stop and remind ourselves that 2 months ago, we weren't even getting interviews. At least now we're getting interviews. So all we got to do is just get a little bit better at this skill set and a little bit better at this skill set. And I even try to take it a step further and try to look at the absurdity of it. The absurdity of a company interviewing me 5 or 6 or 7 times. The absurdity of, dressing up for a Zoom call and wearing gym shorts and a button down, the absurdity of when we were in person, sitting down in a room with someone who has no idea who you are and you've never met them before, but they're going to have their chair slightly higher than yours and pretend like they're in power and judge you when you know that their work is a hot mess and that they have people breathing down their neck, So it's just kind of fun after a while to just look at the absurdity of the process. It can be a little bit disheartening, but if we look at the funny in it, I think that can be really helpful throughout this process. It's really tough to do because we're maybe financially strained. There's a lot going on, but generally speaking, we want to be in this field because we like these topics, right? So get curious about your field and get curious about meeting people and talking about these topics, what I like to call nerding out. If you're out there nerding out with people, you're going to get a job. If you're out there trying to get a job from everyone you meet, you're not going to have a lot of fun because people are not going to want to respond to you. It's the same as if you go on a date and all you want to do is get married, going to be an awkward string of dates, right? If the first thing you say on every single date is, I'm doing this because I want to get married, they're going to be like, cool, what kind of pizza do you like? It's going to be awkward, right? Or they're going to walk away and not call you back. So if every single person we talk to, we say, do you have a job for me? Do you have a job for me? We're going to burn out. They're going to burn out. No one's going to want to talk with us. So what we need to do is go, well, how do I actually get a job from someone? Well, first I have to build trust and rapport. If they like me, they'll refer me. And I can set up things. I can set up dominoes to have a higher chance of falling. But I know most people can't help. So what I'm really doing is research and nerding out. I'm excited about the industry. I'm excited about this topic. I'm excited about this tech. I'm excited about my field. Whatever it is that keeps you excited. Like for me, I'm genuinely interested in education, psychology, mental health, and all these different things. So even if I'm talking to someone and I realize there's no way in hell they'll ever help me get a job, which probably is not even true. There's some way that they can help me maybe, or I can help them in the future. The truth of the matter is that they might have some interesting information. And to that point of the dating analogy, I was watching a comedian the other day and he was saying he loves going on dates because if they're saying smart things, it's interesting. And if they're saying dumb things, it's funny. And it's oh, you don't know that what you're saying is dumb. Well, I'm going to laugh in my head. or what you're saying is fascinating, so I'm having a good time. So it's like, it's up to you to decide if you're always having a good time or always having a miserable time. And it's not easy to do. And that's why we have career coaches. And that's why we allow space to vent for things, right? But try and just try to find what you enjoy about the process, even if it's just a small thing. Maybe it's like collaborating on projects with people, or writing articles about your field, or something like that. Have something that's actually fun, so that it's not just all job search all day. I know that was a lot. I rambled a hell of a lot there, but did I at least hit on your question at one point in there?
You did. Thank you. Thank
Cool.
you very much.
Any other questions around the job search and how to maybe maintain a healthy mindset around this stuff, or how to persuade people? Because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to persuade people. I know we talked about getting noticed earlier. A big key to getting noticed is just showing up. Don't feel like you have to be impressive. You don't. Most of the stuff I share on social media is not impressive. It's just babbling. But I show up and I'm always there. And so people know who I am, right? My live streams every morning are not the world's, most epic thing in the, it's not like I'm laying down truths that are going to explode your mind, but I'm there and I'm showing up. So a lot of what we're trying to do here is just show up in our field. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You don't have to do live streams. You can join a professional organization. You can volunteer for a nonprofit. You can do a number of different things in order to just be in the world, right? If you want to be an actor, you should probably be around actors. If you want to be a writer, you should probably know some writers. If you want to be a web developer, you need to know a lot of web developers, all right? So what you're already doing, being part of this boot camp, is step one. What you should do beyond that is see how many other communities you can be a part of. Maybe you can only be part of one or two because that's all the time you have. But actively engage in those communities because something will come up, all right? There are always people getting fired, promoted, or quitting jobs. If you want to stay in touch with me, I'm on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I got a podcast, do live streaming. I'm all over the internet. So just look up career therapy or look up my name and you'll find all the stuff. Always happy to answer more questions. I'll be sharing this video on YouTube after our call here. So feel free to come back and rewatch at any point in time. And I appreciate you all taking the time to be on the call today and talk through these things. Anything that you want to touch on before we wrap?
Could you paste your LinkedIn
Sure.
link, please?
LinkedIn.com/in/Martin. Boom. Hope that works. Yeah. So, keep in touch. Let me know how things are going. Again, this is a learning process. Treat it the same way you treated learning how to code. You're not going to just make the world's greatest website right off the bat. You're not going to have the world's greatest conversation and networking and interviewing and everything right off the bat. You just get slightly better every time you do it. So the more people you talk to, the more confident you'll be. It's just let it grow slowly over time. All right. And if you get stuck, let me know, and I'll give you either a space to vent or a direction to head. All right. Cool. Great talking with you all. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.